This is the moment the Hale dynasty began to collapse from the inside. Not from political opponents, not from the press, from a deal that Senator Richard Hale's own daughter made in secret in a city he never approved, with people he never knew she was meeting. If you stood outside Blackwood Tower in downtown Manhattan right now, you would see something that has never happened to this building in its 43-year history. Federal vehicles blocking the main entrance on both sides. FBI agents in Navy windbreakers moving through the lobby with evidence collection equipment. Elevator access to floors 14 through 22 suspended by federal order. And on the 31st floor, where Hale Family Enterprises maintains its executive suite, every computer, filing cabinet, and communication device is being photographed and cataloged by agents who arrive with a warrant signed at 7:19 this morning. Senator Richard Hale, already under pressure from a Senate Ethics Committee inquiry, a 29% approval rating in his home state, and three major donors who quietly withdrew their support last month, has just watched federal agents walk into the building that carries his family name. As of 8:47 this morning, the raid is active, the warrant is sealed, and his daughter, Cassandra Hale, has not spoken publicly in 11 days. In this breakdown, we are going to show you exactly what deal Cassandra made, who she made it with, and why it has now triggered the most significant federal action against a sitting senator's family in modern political history. We are going to walk you through what the warrant covers and what federal investigators are specifically looking for inside that building. We are going to show you which of Senator Hale's closest allies have already stopped returning his calls. And we are going to explain why the senator himself may not be able to survive what his daughter set in motion 8 months ago. This is not a political attack. This is a family secret that just became federal evidence. 2 years ago, Senator Richard Hale stood at a podium in his home state and announced the most ambitious economic development initiative of his political career. The plan was straightforward. His family enterprise, Hale Family Enterprises, would lead a private investment consortium to build 3 luxury mixed-use developments in underserved urban districts, generating an estimated 4,200 construction jobs and $890 million in local economic activity. The federal government would provide $340 million in tax incentive backing. State governments would fast-track zoning approvals, and the Hale family would contribute $60 million of their own capital as a show of commitment. It was supposed to be his legacy project, the thing that transformed Richard Hale from a career politician into a builder of communities. He promised groundbreaking ceremonies within 18 months. He promised union labor agreements. He promised transparency in every partnership and every dollar. But what the senator did not know, or what he chose not to examine too carefully, was that his daughter Cassandra had been quietly restructuring the consortium's financing behind the scenes for 6 months before that announcement was ever made. Cassandra Hale, 34 years old, Harvard-trained, and serving as Chief Strategy Officer of Hale Family Enterprises, had identified a foreign investment group called the Meridian Capital Alliance as a potential anchor partner. Meridian had deep pockets, an aggressive growth mandate, and offices in 4 countries. What it also had, and what Cassandra either missed or ignored, were ownership connections to 3 shell companies currently under investigation by the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control. Watchdog groups raised flags within 60 days of the consortium's first public filing. Two financial journalists filed information requests about Meridian's ownership structure. A former Treasury official sent a private letter to the Senate Ethics Committee suggesting the arrangement warranted closer examination. Cassandra's legal team dismissed every concern as competitive interference. Senator Hale's office issued a statement saying all consortium partners had been thoroughly vetted. And the senator himself told a local business audience that the critics were simply uncomfortable watching a political family succeed in the private sector. He gambled that the money would arrive, the buildings would go up, and the questions would disappear. He assumed his daughter knew exactly what she was doing. He assumed wrong. At 6:14 this morning, FBI agents assembled in a federal parking structure 4 blocks from Blackwood Tower. 17 agents, 2 forensic accounting specialists, 1 assistant U.S. attorney observing the execution, a sealed warrant covering financial records, communication devices, digital storage systems, and any physical documentation related to the Meridian Capital Alliance transaction dating back 31 months. At 7:03 a.m., the lead agent contacted Blackwood Tower building security to notify them of the warrant's execution, not to ask permission, to notify. At 7:19 a.m., the warrant was formally activated at the building entrance. Agents entered the lobby at 7:22 a.m. Building security stepped aside within 90 seconds. At 8:47 a.m., the raid was publicly confirmed when a court docket entry appeared under case number 26CR 000 2241-SDNY. Hale Family Enterprises legal counsel was notified simultaneously by phone. The timing of that notification matters enormously. Federal agents were inside the building for 1 hour and 25 minutes before Cassandra Hale's legal team was formally notified. That gap is not accidental. It means investigators had already secured the primary evidence targets on the 31st floor before any attorney could arrive on the premises to raise procedural objections. Now, here is where the situation becomes overwhelming on multiple fronts simultaneously. While agents were working through the 31st floor executive suite, a separate federal team was executing a coordinated warrant at Meridian Capital Alliance's registered U.S. office address in Washington, D.C., 40 blocks from the Capitol building, where Senator Hale was scheduled to chair a committee hearing this morning. While that second location was being searched, the senator's committee hearing was quietly postponed without explanation. A one-line notice posted to the Senate website at 8:52 a.m. simply read, "Rescheduled, date to be confirmed." And while that notice was going up, 3 of the largest institutional investors in Hale Family Enterprises development bonds were placing calls to their legal teams to assess their exposure. By 9:30 a.m., 2 of those investors had quietly suspended further capital deployment into the consortium pending clarification. The bond market for the development project dropped 6.2% in secondary trading within 2 hours of the raid becoming public. That is not a minor fluctuation. That is the market pricing in the probability that the project's financing structure may not survive the next 30 days. The senator's communications team issued a statement at 9:44 a.m. It was 83 words long. It said the family was cooperating fully with authorities and had nothing to hide. It did not mention Cassandra by name. According to sources with direct knowledge of the federal investigation, the warrant executed this morning was not the beginning of this case. It was the conclusion of an 8-month parallel investigation that began when a mid-level compliance officer at Meridian Capital Alliance's European subsidiary contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit through an attorney in March of last year. We have learned from 2 people familiar with the investigation structure that the compliance officer provided internal transaction records showing that $47 million of the $120 million Meridian committed to the Hale Consortium had been routed through a series of intermediate accounts before arriving in the consortium's operating fund. The routing was not disclosed in any of the consortium's public filings. An emergency review was convened inside the Southern District Prosecutor's Office 6 months ago. The participants included senior prosecutors from the Financial Crimes Unit, 2 Treasury Department liaisons, and a specialist in foreign investment compliance. The topic was straightforward. Did Cassandra Hale know where that $47 million came from before she accepted it? And if she knew, did she disclose it to her father or anyone else in the consortium's governance structure? The answer that 8 months of investigation produced was enough to sign the warrant. A senior legal source familiar with the case described the prosecution team's posture as methodical and patient. Their words were, they did not move until they had the full picture. When they moved this morning, they moved everywhere at once. What federal investigators found in the early hours of this morning's search, according to 2 people briefed on the initial findings, included printed email correspondence between Cassandra Hale and a Meridian executive dating back 22 months, internal financial routing summaries that do not match the consortium's public disclosure documents, and a series of encrypted messages on a device recovered from the 31st floor that are currently being processed by the FBI's Digital Forensics Unit. None of that has been charged. All of it is now in federal custody. Why did this happen? Follow the structure of the deal itself. Cassandra Hale is extraordinarily intelligent and extraordinarily ambitious. She grew up watching her father build political capital over 3 decades, and she wanted to build something equally lasting in the private sector. When Meridian Capital Alliance approached her 18 months before the consortium's public announcement, they offered exactly what she needed, a large anchor investor with an appetite for exactly the kind of high-profile urban development project that would put her name on the map, independently of her father's. The problem was not that she did her due diligence carelessly. The problem, according to legal experts familiar with the case, is that when the due diligence returned results that should have raised questions, she made a decision to continue rather than pause. That decision, made in a conference room that no one outside her immediate team knew about, is the center of gravity for everything that happened this morning. The power inside the Hale political operation has now shifted in a way that cannot be quietly managed. Senator Hale can no longer use his family's business success as a political asset. He can no longer point to the consortium project as evidence that his family creates jobs and builds communities. He can no longer distance himself from Meridian Capital Alliance because his daughter's fingerprints are on every document that connected that firm to the Hale name. The legal exposure is layered and serious. At the federal level, investigators are examining potential violations of foreign investment disclosure requirements. wire fraud statutes related to the misrepresentation of funding sources in public filings, and possibly bank fraud if the consortium's lending institutions were given documentation that did not accurately reflect the capital's origins. Any one of those charges is significant. The combination of all three in a single investigation is the kind of legal situation that changes the trajectory of a family permanently. What political historians will note about this moment is that the Hale family's vulnerability was not created by their enemies. It was created by their own confidence that the rules governing ordinary people did not apply to a family with their name, their connections, and their track record. That confidence is precisely what federal investigators counted on to give them enough time to build their case without interference. Here is what the next 90 days look like if this case follows its current trajectory. If the Digital Forensics Unit recovers communications that directly connect Senator Hale to knowledge of the Meridian routing structure, the Senate Ethics Committee inquiry transforms from an administrative review into a criminal referral. If a criminal referral is filed, every Senate colleague who has stood publicly beside Hale in the last 18 months begins calculating the cost of continued association. If that calculation turns negative for enough of them, the senator loses his committee chairmanship before he loses his seat. And losing the chairmanship first is actually worse because it happens faster and more publicly. Foreign governments connected to Meridian Capital Alliance's ownership chain are watching this case with intense interest. At least two of those governments have active diplomatic sensitivities with the United States that become significantly more complicated if Meridian's ownership structure becomes part of a public criminal proceeding. Embassies in Washington have been quietly making calls to their contacts in the legal community since 9 a.m. today, trying to understand the scope of what is being examined. Where is Senator Hale's party leadership right now? Silence. The Majority Leader's office has not issued a statement. The party's National Committee has not responded to press inquiries. Three senators who campaigned alongside Hale in the last election cycle have not answered their phones this morning. That silence is a calculation, not an oversight. Every hour of silence is an hour spent watching the situation develop before choosing whether proximity is an asset or a liability. The business community that celebrated the consortium project as a model of public-private partnership 18 months ago is in full retreat. The two institutional investors who suspended capital deployment this morning are not alone. Sources familiar with the consortium's investor relations say at least 4 additional investors have requested emergency calls with the project's legal team before close of business today. The project itself, the 3 development sites that were supposed to be Senator Hale's legacy, is now in genuine jeopardy of losing its financing entirely before a single additional foundation is poured. And inside Blackwood Tower tonight, sources close to the Hale family describe a senator who arrived at the building at 11:15 a.m., had walked past the FBI evidence staging area in the lobby without speaking to anyone, took the elevator to the 31st floor, and has not come back down. His personal attorney arrived 20 minutes later. His chief of staff has been in the building since 10 a.m. and has not responded to a single press inquiry. Cassandra Hale has not been seen at the building at all today. Her last known location, according to 2 sources, is a residence outside the city, where she has been staying since the investigation became known to the family's legal team 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago. The family knew this was coming for 3 weeks and still had no public response prepared for this morning. Blackwood Tower is not just glass and steel on a Manhattan block. For 31 years, it has been the most visible symbol of everything the Hale family built, earned, and protected. It has appeared in the background of campaign photographs, in the establishing shots of documentary profiles, in the architectural drawings that Cassandra herself presented to development partners as evidence of what the Hale name means in the world of construction and investment. Today, it is a federal evidence collection site. Senator Richard Hale spent 3 decades building walls between his family's ambitions and the consequences of how those ambitions were pursued. He built those walls with legal teams and political relationships and the quiet assumption that a family operating at his level of visibility was also operating beyond ordinary accountability. Federal investigators just walked through every one of those walls with a signed warrant and 17 agents. You can protect a family name with press statements, but you cannot protect it from a forensic accounting team with subpoena authority. You can manage a political narrative through loyal surrogates, but you cannot manage a sealed criminal investigation. You can build a tower with your name on it, but you cannot stop federal agents from entering it when a judge has decided they have cause. Reality does not respect architecture. So where are we right now? Senator Richard Hale is on the 31st floor of his family's building, surrounded by attorneys, watching federal agents finish cataloging the evidence of decisions his daughter made and he either missed or chose not to examine. The bond market for his legacy project has dropped 6.2% today. His party's leadership has gone silent. His institutional investors are calling emergency meetings. And Cassandra Hale, the architect of the deal that brought federal agents to the lobby this morning, is at a residence outside the city that her legal team has not confirmed to the press. As we move through the coming days, expect the senator to attempt 3 things in sequence. First, a public statement, positioning himself as a victim of his daughter's decisions rather than a participant in them, designed to create legal and political distance between the two. Second, a private negotiation between Cassandra's legal team and federal prosecutors to determine whether cooperation is possible and what cooperation would cost. Third, a media strategy built around attacking the credibility of the investigation itself if the first 2 efforts fail to produce a workable outcome. What he will not be able to do is make the warrant disappear. He will not be able to restore the confidence of the institutional investors who are already moving toward the exits. He will not be able to give back the 11 days of silence that Cassandra's absence created. Silence that federal investigators used to finalize their approach and execute simultaneously at 2 locations this morning. The building is still standing. The name is still on the front. But what happened inside it today cannot be unfiled, unrecovered, or unread. The Hale family's story did not end this morning, but the chapter where they controlled how that story was told ended the moment those FBI windbreakers walked through the lobby door. Subscribe. We are tracking 3 developments over the next 72 hours. First, whether federal prosecutors file any charges or simply continue building the evidentiary record. Second, whether Cassandra Hale makes any public statement or whether her continued silence signals active cooperation negotiations. Third, whether Senator Hale's committee chairmanship comes up for a formal review vote, which our sources say is already being discussed in leadership offices that have not yet gone on the record. Each of those 3 things tells us a different part of how far this goes and how fast. This is not the end of the Hale name, but it is the end of the version of that name that operated without consequence. The deal Cassandra made in secret is now public evidence. The tower her father built is now a federal search location. And the question that the next 72 hours will answer is whether this family still has the resources, the relationships, and the will to survive what they built together, finally catching up with them. Watch closely. We will be back the moment anything moves.